Hi, this is Corey Johnston, and in today's lesson, we're going to be discussing wisdom verses from the Old Testament. Now, I've already done one of these for the book of Proverbs. This is going to span the broader range of the Old Testament. And the book of Proverbs can be categorized as wisdom literature, which falls into the writings in the three traditional Hebrew categories of the Old Testament: law, writing, and prophecy. But wisdom in the Old Testament is by no means limited to the writings alone, or the category of genre where the focal point is identified as wisdom. Wisdom is very much omnipresent throughout the laws and in the prophetic claims. So we really get a host of this. And now theological wisdom is distinct from philosophical wisdom in that the latter is derived from independent inquiry, whereas that of theology, more specifically Judeo-Christian theology, receives the items of information by means of revelation. So the object of our worship and the object of our study is an omniscient being in whom the fullness, standard, and origin of wisdom dwell. And Daniel was very much cognizant of this fact, as he writes in chapter 2, verse 21 in the book which bears his name, in reference to him. And he changes the times and the seasons. He removes kings and raises up kings. He gives wisdom to the wise and knowledge to those who possess understanding. So Daniel was not presenting he was not auditioning on his own merits. He was careful to give credit where he was due. Any correct claim he make, this was in the context of him interpreting the troubling dream of Nebuchadnezzar, and he rests his case and the operation in the divine hands to discern the meaning of that dream. And the next verse we're going to turn to is Job 11, 5 through 8, which reads, these are the words of Zophar the Naamanite, and it reads, "But if only Eloah would speak and open his lips against you, and show you the secrets of wisdom, doubling your ability, know then that Eloah forgets your wickedness for you. Would you find out Eloah by searching, or search out the end of El Shaddai? It is higher than the heavens. What would you do? Deeper than the grave. What would you know?" So he at least has a sense of the cosmic majesty and grandeur of Elohim, and he's essentially accusing Job of failing to recognize or submit to the same. And they both seem to attribute the origin of all wisdom in Elohim, and he assesses that the approach for which we may access that wisdom is the humility which Job he allegedly lacks. And the next verse we're going to turn to is Psalm 37:31, which reads, "The mouth of the righteous speaks wisdom, and his tongue talks of justice. The Torah of his Elohim is in his heart. His steps do not slide." So one of the measures and manifestations of wisdom is righteous. So the idea is that the more head knowledge we acquire, the better it will affect and benefit our practical actions in our moral conduct. And this alludes to the interchange of law and wisdom, which I earlier alluded to. The Hebrews, now the next verse we're going to turn to is Deuteronomy 4:6, which reads, "And you shall guard and do them, for this is your wisdom and your understanding before the eyes of the people who hear all these laws. And they shall say, only a wise and understanding people is this great nation." So this is in reference to the Mosaic law, which set the nation of Israel apart from all of its neighbors and competitor civilizations, and the purpose for which they were chosen was to give witness to the world of the Creator whom the world was estranged from. And one of the ways they did that was in their law, which there was really nothing like it in any rival civilization, and the law would produce good government and wise conduct and proper spirituality. The tragedy of the Old Testament is that the Hebrews ultimately didn't heed this sacred charge. And the next verse we're going to turn to is Psalm 90:12. This is the earliest chronologically written psalm, and it's attributed to Moses, from whom the law derives. And he writes, "Teach us to number our days, and let us bring the heart to wisdom." So this is a prayer to Elohim, and he's petitioning them. He's petitioning the Eternal One to teach mortals to be cognizant of the parameters of time in which they exist. And he's also, from that is also a prayer for bringing the heart to wisdom. Now, the heart as a physical organ was generally thought by the ancients to be the center of mental activity, but we know that it is the brain. 2 Chronicles 9:7 picks up on the juxt of the passage just read, and it reads, "Blessed are your men, and blessed are these your servants, who stand continually before you and hear your wisdom." So this was a manifestation of the standard outlined in Deuteronomy. This is the Queen of Sheba, who is a guest in Solomon's palace, and she's aghast and amazed by the wealth and the wisdom and everything he combines and consolidates under his rule. The age of Solomon very much constitutes what may be deemed a golden age of Israel. And of course, because he succumbed to idolatry not long after the visitation of the Queen of Sheba, the United Kingdom of Israel would cease to exist. It would be divided into the kingdoms of Judah and Israel, the northern portion going to a man by the name of Rehoboam, who distinguished himself as a administrator in Solomon's forced labor task, and who ultimately leads a rebellion and flees to Egypt, but that's ultimately irrelevant to what we should be communicated. Now, Solomon is very much the human standard of wisdom. He's generally deemed to be the wisest man who ever lived, and he wrote the book of Proverbs. I've done that, just verses which specifically mention wisdom, but he also authored Ecclesiastes, which are the more mature musings, and he's beginning. So the opening one we're going to read is 1:18. "For in much wisdom is much grief, and he who increases knowledge increases in suffering." So there's a price to pay for wisdom. The wiser we become, the more aware of imperfections and corruptions we are, and this ultimately causes grief. Yet Solomon approaches much of the tone of this book from the vantage point of rationalistic agnostic. And chapter 2, verse 2 through 13, he does come to the conclusion, "And I turn myself to look at wisdom in madness and folly. For what would the man do who comes after the king but what has already been done? Then I saw that wisdom is better than folly, as light is better than darkness." So he finds himself at his wit's end, having accumulated more wisdom than any man who ever lived. And so this compels him to examine the folly from the vantage point of wisdom. Now, wisdom is, of course, able to understand folly in ways that folly can never understand wisdom. But in some sense, there's the maxim of fools is that where ignorance is bliss and to be wise is folly. And but Solomon, after careful reflection and examination and observation, comes to the conclusion that wisdom is in every way superior to folly. And the next passage we're going to read is chapter 7, verses 12 through 18. Or actually, 11 and 12. "Wisdom is good with an inheritance, and an advantage to those who see the sun. For wisdom protects as silver protects, but the advantage of knowledge is that wisdom gives life to those who have it." So wisdom will not only add life to your years to your life, but life to your years. It's identified as a source of wisdom, and it's a spiritual nutrient of sorts. And the accumulation of wisdom is very much a sign of spiritual maturity. And it's identified as a source of security comparable to silver, and then Verse 19 reads, "Wisdom makes the wise strong, more than 10 rulers that are in the city." So wisdom carries its own strength, and wisdom is more, in some sense, stronger than strength on account of the limitations of the human body. Our brains are what render us the superior species, and it's comparable to more than 10 rulers that are in the city. So the idea being that it is very strong. In Job 27:12 through 21, this is an extensive commentary from Job himself. "See, all you have seen it. Why then are you altogether vain?" That's not quite the passage. I think it's 28, 12 through 21. "And wisdom, where is it found? And where is the place of understanding?" So wisdom has an allegedly mysterious origin, which prompts the question of where one can find what one seeks. "And man does not know its value, and it is not found in the land of the living." So whatever wisdom we can claim collectively, we cannot claim any wisdom as the human species. We've mismanaged our stewardly responsibilities for the earth. We've the pursuit of civilization and the cultural exchanges are more defined by war and taking advantage of each other. And so he's saying that it must lie outside of the earth in humanity. "The deep has said, 'It is not in me,' and the sea has said, 'It is not in me.' Gold is not given for it, nor is silver weighed out as its price. It is not valued in the gold of Ophir, its precious shoham or sapphire. Gold or crystal are not to be compared to it, nor is it exchanged for a vessel of gold. No mention is made of coral or crystal, for the price of wisdom is above rubies." So he's essentially elucidating that there's a superior quality in wisdom that can be compared to any earthly item or treasure. Now, wisdom is both a treasure in itself and a gateway to other treasures. It will unlock mysteries and obstacles without which we cannot prosper or flourish. And Jeremiah 9:23 is the next passage we're going to turn to. "Thus said Yahweh, let not the wise boast in his wisdom, let not the mighty boast in his might, nor let the rich boast in his riches." So whatever wisdom we can claim, we have no cause to boast. One, because any wisdom we claim is the result of grace and is given to us. And two, the one who gives it to us is infinitely superior. He is an omniscient being, meaning that the fullness, the origin, and the standard of wisdom reside in him. And we must be, on the other side of the same coin, we must be as inclined to praise him as we are to not be conceited in ourselves. And the final two passages we're going to touch on today come from the book of Isaiah. This is 29, verse 14. "Therefore, see, I am doing a marvelous work among this people, a marvelous work and a wonder. And the wisdom of their wise men shall perish, and the understanding of their clever men shall be hidden." So magnificent is the work which he's preparing and is unfolding foreordained in the councils of eternity by an eternal and omniscient being, is that any fleeting and fragile wisdom accumulated by man will not be able to stand up to it or compare to it or even last in its presence, because this plan, we can imagine, will thwart the wisdom of men and shame the proud and uplift the weak. And chapter 33:6 reads, "And he shall be the faithfulness of your times, a wealth of salvation, wisdom, and knowledge. The fear of Yahweh, that is his treasure." So the fear of Yahweh is identified in several passages throughout the book of Proverbs and in Job's 28th chapter, and also in Ecclesiastes and Psalm 110. as the foundation point of wisdom. So theological wisdom, as I earlier mentioned, is distinct from philosophical wisdom, and that its origin and fulfillment lies in an omniscient being as opposed to independent inquiry. So the items we acquire through theological wisdom are not of our own making or of our own creation. They're the product of revelation. And that concludes today's lesson. Thank you so much. Tune in next time. Bye-bye.